Hi, I'm Kate from Daily Tarot Girl, and welcome to my deep dive into the Knight of Swords. So the image you see on your screen is from the Universal Waite Tarot, and I can't wait to dive into this core card with you. The Knight of Swords is probably the most intense and driven knight in the tarot. And he has a lot of fascinating traits. I can't wait to get into it. But first, I want to mention a couple of things. So I have a free court card cheat sheet for you. If you want to download a copy, I'm going to put the link how to do that just below this video. So it's interesting because we're going to be really diving deeply into each of the core cards, but it can be helpful to just have a few keywords on hand when you're reading to kind of jog your memory. And so that's why I created my cheat sheet for you, to be a handy tool in your reading toolbox. The other thing I want to mention is that I'm going to post a link to the written version of this video. So if you want to get the journaling questions and all of that, I'll put a link to that below this video. And yeah, let's dive in. So the Knight of Swords, the suit of swords, corresponds to the element of air. So this suit is all about the mind and how our intellect, our thoughts, and our beliefs function in our lives. And the suit of swords is also associated with communication. So some symbols to pay attention to on this card. The first thing I notice about this card when I look at it is that it appears to be really, really windy. And if you look at the other Knights cards, you'll notice that there's not as much movement happening, but there's so much movement, and like this big gust of wind is blowing through the Knight of Swords. And I think that this shows that he's, and if you look at the direction that he's going into the wind, and this shows that he's not afraid of a challenge. If anything, that is what really motivates him, something that's going to be really challenging. There's a lot of fast movement on this card, and this is a symbol of his speed and determination. And you'll also notice that there's both butterflies and birds on the horse's, I don't know what you call it, the bridle or the stuff that's hanging on the horse. There's some yellow butterflies and some red birds. And there's also, well, before I get ahead of myself, I feel like the butterflies and the birds represent flight. And then there's also a little pair of silver wings just kind of on his armor right by his knee. And then the red plume in his hat is kind of wing-like. If you look at it closely, it kind of looks like a pair of wings. And I feel like this is a symbol of taking flight, moving, and kind of getting a bird's eye view of things. Now he's holding a sword, and the sword itself is a symbol of focus. So just think of what a sword is like. It's this pointy thing. It's very sharp, and it's that symbol of focusing on something, and it also cuts through things. So his sword is like cutting through things, cutting through distraction, cutting through confusion to really get to the heart of the matter. There's clouds all around him, and I feel like the clouds can represent distraction and confusion, but he's moving through them really quickly with his sword outstretched, so he knows how to cut through these things. He's wearing a red cape, and that red to me symbolizes a certain kind of intensity and passion. And I want you to also notice his body language. So not only is he charging forward into the wind, but he has his arm raised with the sword and his mouth is open in like this battle cry. So he is ready for action. He's more than ready for action. Okay, so a few key words here to keep in mind, a few personality traits. He is focused. The Knight of Swords is very, very focused. He's very driven. He can be very intense. He sometimes has like a one-track mind. He can be very, very determined. And he doesn't hesitate to like charge into things and to charge forward. And he is highly motivated. He's very talented, so he can focus like no one else. Like he's really good at focusing. He knows how to tune out distraction and just really get to the heart of the matter quickly. He has a really impressive amount of energy and intensity, and he's very fast and efficient. So if you were to run into the Knight of Swords at a party, he's either too busy with work, because he can be a workaholic, which we'll get into. He's either too busy with work to attend the party, or if he is at the party, he is partying really hard. Like, you'll find him in the back, you know, snorting lines of cocaine and phoning up sex workers. Like, that's the kind of partier he is. He works hard, he plays hard. If you've ever seen the movie Wolf of Wall Street, I kind of think of him as being kind of like one of those financial guys who does a lot of recreational drugs and is just like really wild when he's partying. Really kind of, you know, off the rails. So yeah, he does this to blow off steam because he works so hard and knows how to focus. When it's his off time, he tries to kind of like counteract that by blowing off steam with partying. And he brings a certain brand of intensity to a party. So if you're having like a low-key tea party, you might not want to invite the Knight of Swords. He would show up and, you know, pour whiskey in the tea, and he'd be slamming shots and you know, just behaving kind of abhorrently. He'd bring a certain kind of intensity that you might not want at your tea party. Okay, so when it comes to work and career, this is actually where he excels, even if all other areas of his life are a mess. So even if his relationships are falling apart, maybe his finances are a mess and his friendships are a mess, he will actually just like take all of his frustration and just focus completely on his work as a way to like deal with things. So that's how he gets through difficult times. So he is a bit of a workaholic. And he is so hyper-focused and driven, and he really derives his sense of self from his job and from his career. And this can be kind of dangerous for him. So I remember I knew a guy who was an airline pilot, and I remember him telling me that he loved his job so much that his job had become like a big part of his identity. And he was terrified of ever losing his job because he said, I don't know who I would be without that job, because it was such a defining factor in who he felt he was. And so that's kind of something that the Knight of Swords struggles with, is that he can really put a lot of his identity in the work that he does. So in terms of like specific careers that you might find the Knight of Swords working, I can kind of picture him like as a finance guy, like a Wall Street guy, or even some sort of job where he's doing a lot of talking, like a podcaster or a talk show host or a stand-up comedian, or even a writer who like churns out like book after book after book. Now remember, the suit of swords is all about communication. And when we were talking about the Queen of Swords, I said that the Queen of Swords is really good at public speaking and writing and really getting her point across through using words. And the Knight of Swords, he likes words and he likes talking. He isn't necessarily as effective and powerful as the Queen because he hasn't attained that level of mastery yet. He's kind of like the guy who likes to hear himself talk a lot. Very, very chatty, loves to talk. So he would be like the perfect sort of podcaster. That's kind of how I picture him. When it comes to love and relationships, oh boy, you can imagine like what a disaster this guy is when it comes to love and relationships. So he loves to pursue a love interest, but once he's captured someone, he starts to lose interest really quickly because he just loves the thrill of the chase. He can be very passionate and intense in bursts and then just poof, disappear for days or weeks at a time, and you don't hear from him. And he can seem very impressive at first in a relationship. So anyone who dates a Knight of Swords type might be really swept off their feet in the beginning because he can initially be very hyper-focused on a partner and make them feel very special. But then once he feels like he has their attention and their love, then his hyper-focusedness will shift from that person onto his job, and he will become hyper-focused on work, and he becomes a workaholic and almost like totally ignores his partner. He's often absent, distracted, and obsessed with work, and sometimes he even sees relationships as a distraction from his work, and so for this reason he is more into hookups, hiring escorts or sex workers, and having flings as opposed to having a serious relationship. So when it comes to money and finances, the Knight of Swords is very impulsive and likes to take risks with his investments. He makes money and spends money very quickly, so he has no trouble, making money, but then he also spends it. And when he spends money, he likes to do it in this very intense, over-the-top kind of way. He's looking for a bit of a rush. The Knight of Swords really is a thrill seeker. Well, the last card we talked about was the Knight of Pentacles, and I said, this isn't the kind of guy who goes on the roller coaster and does anything in an extreme way. The Knight of Swords is almost, in some ways, the polar opposite of the Knight of Pentacles. He's looking for a rush, and so when it comes to spending money, he isn't necessarily particularly materialistic, but he's looking for a thrill. So he might spend a ton of money on a really fancy, luxurious car just to get that rush, and then he gets bored of it, so he sells it, and then he might spend a ton of money on taking a partner on a lavish vacation, and it's all for the show aspect, or not the show aspect, but the thrill of spending a bunch of money on something kind of lavish. So the Knight of Swords thrives on having a goal or something to focus on, something to put his attention on. Without this, he self-destructs. So think about a young child who has tons and tons of energy, and you have to give that kid something to do, or that kid's just going to start destroying your house and breaking things. It's kind of like that. The Knight of Swords has so much built up energy that he needs to have a focus, he needs to have something to direct it towards, or else it can become very destructive. He thrives on challenges and being given problems to solve. So he loves a challenge. He loves to feel like he's, challenged in some way. He loves working in a really fast pace way. He loves to have a lot of stuff to do, to be really busy, and to be working in a really fast paced, high stress kind of environment. He's one of those rare people who thrives under a lot of pressure and stress. He loves cities. He loves the big city life. And he's someone who would actually thrive during wartime. There's some people that experience war and they never want to talk about it again because it was so traumatic. And then there's some people that experience war and they never shut up about it because it was the most exciting time in their lives. That is a Knight of Swords type character. He's someone who would love to be on the battlefield and would just thrive in that high pressure environment. So some things that the Knight of Pentacles or Knight of Swords can't stand. The Knight of Swords cannot stand having nothing to do. He doesn't like just sitting on his laurels doing nothing. He also doesn't love being given tasks that just aren't that challenging. He can't stand small town vibes. So this isn't the kind of guy who's going to live he's not going to retire to a small little town. He doesn't like the quaint rural lifestyle at all. He needs a big city with a lot of noise and a lot of activity and drama happening around him. He can't stand the feeling of being stuck in one place. And he also doesn't love being at peace or peacetime. And he'll probably never admit this, but when things are peaceful and nothing needs to be done and everything is going really well, this is really boring for him and he really can't stand this. So let's talk about his dark side. So the Knight of Swords can be very impulsive and he can do things suddenly without thinking. He does burn out eventually, so he is prone to burning out and like just crashing and burning, because you can't focus intensely and be hyper motivated and productive forever. Eventually you burn out. Even if you are naturally the kind of person that thrives under a lot of pressure, if you don't balance it out, you will burn out very, very quickly. And one thing that the Knight of Pentacles, or no, sorry, Knight of Swords, one thing that the Knight of Swords has to be careful of is that all of his efforts and hard work can be for nothing if he isn't clear on his why. So if he isn't clear on why he's doing something, and if his actions are not tied to any deeper meaning, then his efforts can actually sometimes be destructive. So he's prone to sort of succumbing to just trying to keep busy and chasing thrills. And if he doesn't look deeply beneath the surface and tie his actions into a deeper meaning, he can just sort of go through life just constantly jumping from one thrill to the next thrill, and just constantly trying to keep busy and active so that he doesn't stop and think about things. So that is something he needs to be aware of. So some ways that you can embody this card is setting a goal and focusing on that goal. Just focusing on like one thing at a time and blocking out all distractions. So one thing that I like to do when I'm working at home is if I have a task to do that's important, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna set aside 1 hour and I am only gonna focus on this task. I'm not gonna answer the phone, I'm not gonna check email, I'm not gonna hop on social media, I'm not gonna make myself a coffee, I'm not gonna do any other thing than this task for just this hour. That is very Knight of Swordsy. Drinking lots of coffee is another way you can kind of embody this card. And I like to do something called, I call it like a batch day, where I will just focus on one thing for the entire day. So sometimes I do this with cleaning my house. So I'll do all my cleaning in one day from like the morning to the evening. I'll just focus on doing all my cleaning tasks in one day. Or if I'm working on my business, I'll have a day where I just make videos. So I'll do all the prep work prior to that, and then I'll have a batch day where I just make a bunch of videos. I know people do this with cooking, so they'll have like one day a week where they'll cook all these things to eat throughout the week, and they'll freeze things or whatever. But just focusing on one thing for an entire day and getting a whole bunch of stuff done is one really great way that you can embody the energy of the Knight of Swords. So I have some journaling questions for you. How or where can you benefit from these traits of the Knight of Swords that we talked about? How can you bring more balance and avoid burnout? Now remember, I'm going to post these questions below this video, and you can also find them on my blog. I'll put a link to that below the video. The other question is, where would you like to be less like this Knight? And I'm really interested in hearing your comments. So let me know in the comments below, like, did you find it easy to relate to this Knight? Or can you think of other people who you're like, oh yeah, that's my brother, or that's my coworker or whatever. So where would you like to be less like this Knight, or where would you like to be more like this Knight in your life? What helps you focus and avoid distractions? And last but not least, who do you know that is like this Knight? So I would love to hear your answers in the comment section. And I just want to close this video by saying thank you so much for joining me. I hope you learned some new things about the Knight of Swords. Please feel free to like and subscribe to my channel. Next, I'm going to be posting my video on the Knight of Cups, and he is a really fascinating character as well, so I can't wait for that video. And don't forget to download your court card cheat sheet. I'll put the link below to how you can grab that. So thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time.